On today's order paper, orders of the day, ordre du jour.
Private member's business, consideration of M-75 Polish Heritage Month, standing in the name of Mr. Fonseca.
Fonseca, appuyé par Monsieur Baker, propose que
Mr. Fonseca, seconded by Mr. Baker, moves that A, the House recognize the significant contributions Polish Canadians have made to Canadian society, economy, politics, and culture, and the importance of educating Canadians of all ages about the core values that Polish Canadians have imparted to the strength and diversity of Canada.
et à la vigueur du Canada, and B, in the option of the House, the government should reflect upon Polish heritage for future generations and designate May 3rd of every year as Polish Constitution Day and the month of May every year as Polish Heritage Month. Debate. The honourable member for Mississauga East Cookville.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank my colleague, the member for Etobicoke Centre, for seconding this motion. And I know he has a large Polish-Canadian community in his riding. Witam, dziękuję. I stand before you today with a heart full of pride and gratitude as we embark on a significant journey together. Today, I propose a celebration of heritage, a recognition of history, and a dedication to unity. Today, I stand and ask for your support to declare the month of May as Polish Heritage Month and to designate May 3rd as Polish Constitution Day in our great nation of Canada. M-75 transcends mere acknowledgement of the historical bonds connecting Canada and Poland. It serves as a heartfelt tribute to the flourishing Polish-Canadian community, celebrated for their substantial contributions to our great nation. The historical roots of Polish immigration to Canada reach back as early as 1752, when the first documented Polish immigrant set foot on Canadian soil. Today, the Polish-Canadian community numbers over 1 million strong. Polish migration to Canada has a long history, with the earliest waves of immigrants arriving in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Many Polish immigrants sought better economic opportunities and escaped political unrest in their homeland. The subsequent waves of migrants occurred after World War II and during the communist regime in Poland. These historical events shaped the size and composition of the Polish-Canadian community. The Canadian Poles community is widespread across Canada, with significant concentrations in cities such as my hometown of Mississauga, in Toronto, Ottawa, Winnipeg, Windsor, Calgary, and Edmonton, just to name a few. According to the most recent census data from 2021, there were approximately 1.1 million people of Polish descent in Canada, making up close to 3% of the total population. These statistics provide some insights into the distribution and growth of the Polish community within the country. Their valor, unwavering determination, and tireless efforts spanning 271 years stand as a testament to their unwavering commitment to enrich our nation. With the essence of Polish culture, a robust work ethic, deep faith, and unparalleled resilience, the profound impact of our Polish-Canadian community on Canada's social, cultural, political, and economic landscape cannot be overstated. Their dedication and perseverance have left an indelible mark on our nation. From the arts, music, to entrepreneurship, academia, the Polish-Canadian community has made boundless contributions to our society. The proposition to designate May 3rd as Polish Constitution Day and dedicate the entire month of May as Polish heritage goes beyond symbolism. Like Canadians, Polish people have ardently pursued freedom and democracy, bringing Europe its first modern constitution, May 3rd, 1791, and the second oldest after the U.S. Constitution. On the walls here in this Parliament building, you will see all the names of the MPs. Speaker, to find the first member of Parliament of Polish descent, you must go all the way back to the first Parliament in Canada in 1867. Alexandre Edward Krzykowski, MP, 1867, born in Poland, immigrated to Canada and represented St. Hyacinthe, Quebec riding in Canada's first Parliament. Today, in our 44th Parliament, we have a number of MPs of Polish descent, including my colleague, the member for Windsor-Tecumseh, who's the chair of the Canada-Poland Parliamentary Friendship Group. This motion is a tangible and deeply sincere expression of our gratitude for the remarkable achievements and contributions of the Polish-Canadian community. This proposal represents our heartfelt homage to their history, a celebration of their present, and an inspiration for their future. Speaker, I've had many opportunities to speak with countless of my Canadian Polish constituents about their immigrant story. Like friend and Olympic coach Bogdan Poprowski, my friend Ziggy Pigel, my good friend and neighbor John Solarski has enriched my life, I could tell you, with his stories of Polish businesses like his dad's pharmacy on Roncesvalles, or of sports like the Polonia baseball team he coaches. In his words, I can feel the great pride he has as a Canadian of Polish heritage. For all Poles, you feel their joy when their Canadian-born children learn new Polish words like babcia, grandmother, or dziadek, grandfather, or when their kids ask about what their grandparents and parents' early lives were like, or the children research for themselves their Polish history. They are truly celebrating their past. It is my hope that M-75 will provide another opportunity for the community and families to recount their life on the farm, the village, their ancestors, the food, the traditions, the language, their journey to Canada, and much more. Despite being half a world away from their original homeland, in some ways the Polish community is more connected to it than when they left. Today, their newfound heritage grows through their children and grandchildren as Polish Canadians. Keeping the Polish culture and heritage alive does not only happen at home, but in the broader community, through cultural centers, churches, schools, through organizations like the Canadian Polish Congress, Polish Teachers Association, Polish Scouts, Canadian Polish Business Associations, Veterans Associations, great festivals like the Mississauga Polish Day Festival with its founders and leaders Anna Golbinski and Anna Muskrowicz, or the Chopin Society Festival. And I want to thank Henry and Anna Lipinski for sharing their love of music, or Mississauga's Karasaga Festival with its Polish-Canadian director Marek Ruda, just to name a few. Speaker, allow me to highlight Canada's strong ties with Poland and its representatives here. I want to thank Polish Ambassador Witold Jelski and the Embassy for his support of the Polonia community in Canada and for this motion. Ambassador Jelski is no stranger to Parliament or to Mississauga, a city which is home to one of the largest Polish populations in all of Canada, and a mayor of Polish descent, Mayor Bonnie Crombie. The community organizes various events and initiatives to celebrate Polish heritage and to promote cross-cultural understanding. Speaker, I am so proud to represent a riding of Mississauga East Cooksville with the largest Polish community in all of Canada. Also located in Mississauga East Cooksville is the John Paul II Polish Cultural Center and the Maximilian Kolbe Foundation. The Maximilian Kolbe Foundation was founded in 1982 and is the heart of the Polish community in Mississauga and the GTA region. It has established a cultural community center for the Poles in Mississauga, and after years of hard work and collecting funds, the center was opened in the fall of 1994. Both the foundation and the center are closely connected with the largest Polish church, Maximilian Kolbe Parish, in Canada, and we thank Father Bogdan Oshetsky for his service. Adjacent to the church is where the John Paul II Cultural Center building is situated. The center consists of a concert hall, stage, library, bowling room, a club. Almost every day they host various cultural events as well as classes for education and integration for adults, children, youth, and seniors. It serves as a central gathering place for the Polish community in Mississauga, offering various programs and events that celebrate Polish culture, including language classes, art exhibitions, music performance, and dance groups like Radość Joy Vocal Dance Group and Lichowia Polish Folk Dance Company. The Canadian Polish Congress is an organization that acts as a voice for the Polish-Canadian community, advocating for their rights and interests. It has shown great leadership and advocating and championing this motion. I thank them, and I want to give a big thanks and shout out to the National President, Tom Tomczak, and the First Vice President, Dominik Roszak, Board Member and friend, District President Les Blachik from Mississauga, and the entire Board of Directors. I say thank you to the Congress. Also want to thank former Toronto Councillor Chris Corwin-Kozinski for his support. The Congress represents the Polish community's interests and the Government of Canada by providing a strong national voice in the decision-making of our government's policies and promoting the rights of Polish Canadians to full and equal participation in all aspects of Canadian society. And this motion is in large part due to their advocacy. The Canadian Polish Congress promotes awareness of and respect for Poland's history and heritage and the contribution of Poles to the culture of Canada and the world, and we thank them. The Congress is a unifying force, coordinating and supporting Polish-Canadian organizations so that those community organizations provide a wide range of programs, events, and services to support the local Polish population. Excuse me. I want to commend the Congress for its focus on youth in particular and for hosting many youth leadership opportunities, like the Polonia Leadership Summit we just had here 2 weeks ago on Parliament Hill. Also, thank you to Polish Teachers Association in Canada for their mission to teach Polish language in as many Canadian schools as possible. Teachers like Irene Urbaniak and many others. Polish schools in Mississauga play a crucial role in preserving Polish language, skills, and culture, heritage among Polish-Canadian children. These schools provide language instruction, history lessons, cultural activities to ensure transmission of Polish traditions to the younger generations. Speaker, many of our Polonia youth are involved in Polish scouting in Canada. In my riding of Mississauga, it is one of the great ways where hundreds, Speaker, of junior and senior scouts learn Polish culture, Polish language, Polish scouting traditions while exploring Canada's great outdoors through all seasons, including the winter. Polish Canadians have always rolled up their sleeves with a vigorous entrepreneurial spirit. I thank the Canadian Polish Business Association and its president and CEO, Mr. Irek Kusmierczyk, for their tireless work to enhance the business climate in the Polish-Canadian community and expand international trade. The ties between Poland and Canada have only grown stronger, and local small and medium businesses run in the Polish community continue to thrive, adding jobs and growth to our country. Canada and Poland exemplify solidarity. We were, we are, and we will continue to stand together. On behalf of the Government of Canada, I'd like to also extend a heartfelt thank you to our Polish Canadians for Poland's unwavering support to Ukraine during these difficult times. Speaker, the Polish community has integrated into the Canadian cultural landscape by preserving Polish traditions, organizing cultural events, contributing to various sectors, and fostering cross-cultural understanding. Polish festivals, food, music, arts have become part of the multicultural fabric of Canadian society, enriching the cultural diversity of the country. I wholeheartedly implore your support in this endeavor. I call upon each one of you to join hands in making this motion a reality, to pay homage to the remarkable legacy of the Polish-Canadian community and to reaffirm the enduring partnership between Canada and Poland. Let us, as a united House here, recognize their invaluable contributions and celebrate their enduring spirit, Speaker. Thank you very much. Dziękuję bardzo. Nidzia Polska, Nidzia Canada. Thank you, Speaker.
Questions et commentaires. L'honorable député de Joliette.
Merci, Madame la...
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to start by thanking my colleague for this initiative. We know that Polish culture is very important in our society. That's also the case in Quebec. We are lucky to have a great deal of Polish culture. For example, my favorite artist, Lidia Kapinski, is of Polish origin. If you like dancing, you should go to her shows. It's amazing. Now we know that May 3rd in Poland is Constitution Day, which refers to the Constitution of 1791. And we know that my colleague is an excellent runner. Would he be willing to run a marathon if this motion is adopted to celebrate Polish culture?
The député de Mississauga East Cooksville.
Well, Madam Speaker, I thank my honourable colleague and who we sit together on the Finance Committee, and just to his words in terms of this celebration of really of freedom, democracy, of the first constitution in Europe, and the second oldest constitution in the world. And in regards to the challenge of a marathon, I will walk with my colleague. We will do it around here, around Parliament Hill, the day that this passes. But I thank him for his support. And yes, you know what, the Polish community has great talent in music, in the arts, and to know that one of the first parliamentarians of the first parliament here was from Quebec and from St. Hyacinthe is something that we all cherish. So thank you very much to my honourable colleague.
Comments, questions et commentaires. The honourable from Nunavut.
And I'd like to thank the member for his intervention. I did my undergrad at Lakehead University in Thunder Bay, and I know that there was a wonderful Polish community there. I just wondered if the member could respond to what would happen if this motion was not passed.
L'honorable député de Mississauga East Cooksville.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague. And like in Thunder Bay and at Lakehead and right across our great country from coast to coast to coast, we have Poles in all of our communities. And Madam Speaker, I know that this House will embrace this motion because all of us support our diversity, our unity, and what brings us together is the richness of the many cultures that we have in this great country of Canada. And it will mean so much to the Polish community to be able to give them that opportunity, I would hope, to be able to again celebrate May and May 3rd as Chichimaya, as they say, Constitution Day here in Canada for years to come. So, Madam Speaker, again, I implore and I reach out to all members that we support this motion for the Polish community. Thank you.
Time for a brief question. The honourable member Edmonton Manning.
Thanks, Madam Speaker. Thanks to the member for bringing this bill or this motion to the House. I've had the opportunity to work with the community. Edmonton is a home for a large Polish community, as well as I had a neighbor actually from the Polish community. The question is a month of Heritage Month, Polish Heritage Month. What type of activities will the community be looking for to host in the month of May, as I understood from this bill?
The honourable member for Mississauga East Cooksville has 1 minute to respond.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker, and I would thank the honourable colleague, and of course Edmonton, like we said, all communities right across our great land. But you know, one thing I didn't talk about was the great food, right? You know what? We've got pierogies and sausages, and I have to say I love the beer. But Madam Speaker, we have festivals, opportunity to celebrate culture and history, and to bring bring everybody together. So it's a real time that we can also talk about our democracy and talk about what Poland has brought to Canada. But like through this motion, it will be an impetus to be able to bring the community in a way to celebrate and to not only within the community, but to share with all others all the great things about Polish heritage and culture. So it will be a great time, and I look forward to going out with the member and eating some nice pierogies and some great Polish sausage.
Resuming debate, the honourable for Calgary-Shepherd.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I am joining the debate. I read the motion. The parts I want to talk about the most, I'll spend 10 minutes on these. The importance of educating Canadians of all ages about the core values that Polish Canadians have imparted. And the second part I want to draw the attention of the House to is government should reflect upon Polish heritage for future generations. I have a Yiddish proverb. I always do. Yiddish and Polish are very closely connected, as many members know. I'm not asking God for an easier burden. I'm asking for broader shoulders when I speak on this subject. The previous member who spoke did talk about the wave of immigration to Canada. Those waves were caused by events happening in Eastern Europe. From the first partition of Poland in 1772, the member spoke about the Constitution at 3 Maja, May 3rd of 1791, the second oldest written constitution in the world, a constitution that was then abolished by a future parliament of dubious distinction. And the final partition of Poland was in 1795, where Poland disappeared. Poland's greatest contributions are not institutions and organizations, they're its people. People all over the world who have fought for freedom in the name of freedom, from the American Revolution to those who came to Canada and built a new life for themselves, but also many who then returned to Poland or to continental Europe and fought in the different wars of independence so that Poland could be free again. One thing I want to draw the House's attention to is the Statute of Kalisz, signed in 1264 by another great Pole, Bolesław the Pious, who Poland was the first country, the first people to give legal rights to the Jewish people in continental Europe. So I want to draw the attention of the House to that as well. One other great Pole I want to recognize is Zbigniew Gondek, 99 years old. He passed away. Polish veteran of World War II, fought at Monte Cassino, earned the Virtuti Militari, Poland's highest military decoration, a great Polish Canadian. Another Pole I want to draw the attention of the House to is Jan Karski. Jan Karski wrote a story of a secret state, My Report to the World, where he described the horrors of the crimes committed by the Nazis and by the Soviet Union, of course. Born in Łódź in 1914, at the outbreak of World War II, he fought the Red Army. He was a proud Pole who fought Red Army soldiers because the Soviet Union, the Russian Federation, invaded Poland with its allies in Nazi Germany and crushed Poland's armies after a few weeks. He was made a POW and deported somewhere into Siberia. In his book, he tells the story of the abuse he suffered of Soviet soldiers. He was also later captured by the Gestapo as a courier for the Polish underground. In his book, he also relates the story of having met the US president and relating all the crimes that were committed by Soviet soldiers, by Nazi soldiers, against Jewish people, against the Poles, the Czechs, the Slovaks, the Ukrainians, and many others. I have the books. I want to read from it because there is mention of Canada. Jan Karski had never come to Canada, but when he was being smuggled through Spain, his handlers told him, I'm going to read from it, he turned to the conductor and slapped his chest. Canada, he said triumphantly. Canada, his son echoed. Canada, I added weakly. Bravo, bravo, the conductor beamed at us. And he goes on to say it was obvious to them, if we got captured, to say we are Canadians, because if you are Canadians in Spain, you would be deported to Britain, and Britain was their destination of choice. So I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that when speaking of Jan Karski, one of those great Polish patriots, great Poles. Another one I want to mention quickly is Captain Witold Pilecki, who is credited as the only man to have volunteered to go to Auschwitz. It takes a certain type of human being to volunteer yourself to go to a concentration camp. He spent 947 miserable nights there so that he could then relate it back to the Polish underground, and the Polish underground could then inform the Western powers, including Canadians, of the crimes being committed against the Jewish people, against Poles, against Ukrainians and Slovaks, and all those who opposed the Nazi regime. Witold Pilecki fought in the Polish-Lithuanian War. He fought in the Polish-Soviet War. Like many Poles of his era, he was actually born in Russia. His family had been deported from Vilna to East Karelia, and that's where he was from. He's also one of many Polish underground members who would be later murdered by the Soviet Union in show trials. He was arrested in May 1947, sent to Mokotów prison, which many Poles know very well. In a show trial that lasted barely a few weeks, he was then sentenced to death and he was executed, as were his so-called co-conspirators, but many Poles remember him as one of those great freedom fighters. I do want to mention one thing also about those events, because amongst Poles in Canada, especially Katyn, the Katyn massacre is remembered as a great crime committed by communists, by the Soviet Union. It was secret order number 001177 issued by the Politburo for the execution and murder of 25,568. They're called victims, but these were Polish generals, soldiers, members of the clergy, professors, members of Poles, proud Poles who were murdered by the Soviet Union. The truth only came out in the 1990s and was then shared more broadly with the world. But it's one of those crimes that the Russian Federation and the Soviet Union has never been made to pay for, with more public criticism of it. Closer to home, there was mention of the first Polish member of parliament from Saint-Hyacinthe, 1867 to 1870, Aleksander Edward Kieszkowski. And Hanser doesn't have to worry. I've written down all the names, so if they want to get the notes from me afterwards, they can figure out how to spell them correctly. I want to draw also, because some of the community centers were mentioned, Maximilian Kolbe. Maximilian Kolbe is a very, very well-known priest who was in Auschwitz and who gave himself in place of a Jewish man. He volunteered himself to be executed before somebody else could. That's why so many community centers are named after Maximilian Kolbe. That's why if you are Polish and you name your first son Maximilian the way I did, you will forever be asked the question by other Poles, did you name him after Maximilian Kolbe? Because it takes a special type of person to volunteer themselves for death for a member of another faith community, because it is the right thing to do. That is your calling in life. The Canadian Polish Congress is a long-running institution. I said I wouldn't talk about organizations, but I do want to talk about one gentleman from the organization, Władysław Lijon, who was a member of parliament, a conservative who represented this place proudly as a former president of the Congress. I also want to note Sir Kazimierz Stanisław Grzowski, who was Lieutenant Governor of Ontario between 1896 and 1897. He was personally knighted by Queen Victoria. Back to a bit more history. The Trial of 16 is a well-known event. Again, these are Polish underground leaders who were invited to Moscow after the war officially ended for Western European powers, not so much for Polish people in Eastern Europe. And in this Trial of 16, the Polish underground was basically kidnapped at the NKVD, and most of its members were then either executed or imprisoned for long lengths of time. Closer to recent history, the Solidarity movement is well remembered. Many members have family members who were in Solidarity, some whose parents were arrested. My father was a member of Solidarity, was never arrested. He did leave Poland, though, a week before my older brother was born, younger brother was born, much to my mom's infuriation. Solidarity, I want to mention, everybody thinks of Lech Wałęsa, but we should really draw attention to the woman who kicked off the protests. Anna Walentynowicz was fired 5 months before her retirement because the communists couldn't stand the fact that she was simply drawing attention to the fact people were stealing from the workers, people were mistreating the workers, and she was tired of the communists oppressing the trade union workers. She deserves credit for the kickoff of the protests, which eventually led to martial law in Poland, and many of us, my generation, who were made to leave during that time period. So I was told I have 5 minutes, and I want to talk just very briefly about this new brotherhood that we have between Poles and Ukrainians, because I think it stretches beyond just the region. It stretches to the diaspora communities also in Canada. For hundreds and hundreds, for centuries, hundreds and hundreds of years, Poles and Ukrainians haven't always gotten along. We're the same ethnic group, we have a different language, mostly share the same faiths, but never before has there been such a march of darkness in Eastern Europe where people are struggling and fighting for their own freedoms, to see two people who historically have fought wars and have done terrible things to each other now standing side by side. So I have a Ukrainian intern I've hosted in years past, and I want to say this. After she gave me a book and I got to read a bit more about Ukrainian history, that without a free Ukraine, there is no free Poland. And without a free Poland, there is no free Ukraine. And I'll draw the attention of the House because I know my time is running now short. I thought I'd be able to get in more. I did get in my Yiddish proverb. The Polish national anthem, it's the Mazurek Dąbrowski, has two lines in it which speaks to what Polish people truly care about. In the two lines, I won't say them in Polish, I'll say them in English. Poland has not yet perished so long as we still live. The most important contribution Poles have made is the people, the freedom fighters who have fought for freedom wherever we have been in the world. Thank you.
Reprise de débat. L'honorable député de Saint-Hyacinthe-Pagode.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Je voudrais...
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to join my colleagues and show my support for the staff of TVA who have been fired during this restructuring. They've lost their jobs. They are part of a new system that is in crisis. We will have to act and be proactive. And so I want to express my solidarity and compassion, and we have to do so through real action. I'm pleased to rise in this place to support, with my colleagues for the Bloc Québécois, motion M-75, which establishes Polish Heritage Month. The first Polish person in this House, which goes back to the creation of Parliament in 1867, was one of my predecessors, Alexandre Edouard Kierzkowski, who was the member for Saint-Hyacinthe. I am therefore pleased to rise to speak today. Kierzkowski, who was member for Verchères at the National Assembly in Quebec with the Red Party, which were the descendants of the Patriots Party. So that's something that certainly is in line with my own Republican values. Quebecers want to highlight the exceptional contribution of Quebecers of Polish origin, their contribution to Quebec's culture and society. Their contribution is significant, especially since the Quiet Revolution. The Charter of the French language unites Quebecers of all origins and ensures that we have a common origin and history. That means sharing the French language. The first Polish immigrant in Canada arrived before the British conquest. Dominic Bass, a fur trader from Ganst. And I'm sorry if sometimes I mispronounce these names. I hope that our Polish citizens forgive me. It's not my first, second, or third language. I don't speak Polish, so I apologize. He set up in 1852 in Montreal. And Charles Blazkowicz, who joined him in 1857, who worked as a land surveyor. And so this is one of the first places Polish people settled in Canada. So the Bloc Québécois wants to highlight the history of Quebec and how Polish people are part of it. And in 1843, the Polish Science Institute was set up, which is an important contribution. Polish settlers created strong institutions, including one of the first health centers inaugurated by René Lévesque in 1967. In 1984, Dr. Camille Lauré, the father of the Charter of the French language, who was Minister of Health at one point. The ethno-linguistic character of the Institute was significant. This contribution was recognized by Quebec's National Assembly in May of 1984, so that contribution has been recognized for some time.
Polish immigrants have also marked Quebec's literature. In his roman, These Children from Elsewhere, the storyteller Irek Kusmierczyk was an author of some of our favorite novels. And through their stories, they helped us discover many characters, some of which were fleeing war. They traveled from Poland from 1839 all the way to us, to Montreal. We are pleased to participate in designating May 3rd the Polish Constitution Day and the month of May as Polish Heritage Month. 20 years after Poland was divided up by Russia and Germany, a tragic event, there was a modern constitution set up in Europe. They aimed to set up a constitutional monarchy, and they were inspired by the French Revolution and introduced free elections based on freedom and the rule of law. It was a symbol of hope for restoring their nation's sovereignty. These are concepts which are obviously dear to us. May 3rd remains for Polish people an inspiration in their quest for independence. In Quebec, our ancestors were experiencing their first steps of parliamentarism. In our history, French Canadians and Quebecers are always questing for their political freedom. I'm delighted that Quebecers take inspiration from their fellow citizens of Polish origin. Polish Canadians have been subject to a certain amount of misrepresentation in some cases.
Représente la population du Canada, formant une vaste mosaïque culturelle.
They are part of a vast cultural mosaic. National realities between Quebec and Canada exercise an influence on the successive waves of immigration in Canada throughout the decades, especially linguistic and cultural factors. Quebecers of Polish origin don't have the same integration into society as Canadians of Polish origin. Those who settled outside of Quebec, who assimilated into the Canadian majority, are such that we observe a difference. Those that settle in Quebec are integrated into society through the French language. It's not necessary to assimilate Quebecers and Canadians as though they were part of the very same nation. We support the motion while expressing the distinct contribution of Quebecers of Polish origin to our society. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Resuming debate, the honourable member for Edmonton-Griesbach.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and I'm very pleased today to rise to speak to Motion 75, Polish Heritage Month. Madam Speaker, it's no secret that here in Edmonton, right across Treaty 6 in many of the prairies, that Polish Canadians have not only found peace, found prosperity, but have also found, I think in many ways, the steps and the materials and the time to build relations with so many other groups. And it's a great day to be able to speak to, particularly on my behalf, to speak to the unique history that Canada has. A history that has welcomed newcomers both from as early as the 1600s to when the first Poles arrived in the 1880s. It's been something that I think most Canadians may not be aware of. And I think it's incumbent on all of us to remind Canadians that there are so many folks, including the great many Polish Canadians right across the prairies, that have contributed to the very early building of Canada. It's what so many Canadians may take for granted, this history and this very difficult time for our country when it first started to be built. There's no question of many of those persons not only sacrificing much of what they needed and who they brought with them, but the immense work and sacrifice it takes to rebuild and restart from coming so far away. Canada is a relatively new country to the West. Many Indigenous people, in particular my families, have been here for millennia. And it wasn't until 1867 until the Crown, by way of Queen Victoria, asserted in many ways jurisdiction over huge swaths of land here in Canada. But Indigenous people, we took the opportunity to find peace and prosperity with our Crown partners by way of treaty. And it wasn't until the question of treaty, in particular the historic numbered treaties, was answered that other folks could, in this case, come to Canada. The Crown had to do a really big job. It had to delineate between who and what persons could be present in North America, at that time known as the British North America. And British North America, for the long period of its time, didn't occupy much of Western Canada. So Western Canada was largely absent of many European persons of European descent, minus those who entered the fur trade. Later on, of course, in 1867, Treaty 6, where most Polish Canadians now find themselves, was signed. It was signed at Fort Pitt near Fort Carleton and the Battle Rivers. That treaty, which is so important, I think, for Canadians, in particular members of Parliament, we must understand how important these treaties are in order to better understand why Canadians are here, why we have the great mosaic we do today, and why we celebrate and lift up Polish Canadians and so many others. It was in 1867 that our ancestors, Indigenous ancestors, and many Canadian forebears came together at those places between the Battle River, and we signed an agreement. And I'll read a portion of Treaty 6, and I'd hope that many members can take an opportunity later today or in the many months to come to read some of the historic treaties here in Canada, because it directly relates to how many peoples, including Polish Canadians, found themselves in our prairies. It states that from the preambulatory sections of Treaty 6, for example, it says, it is the desire of Her Majesty to open up for settlement, immigration, and other such purposes as to Her Majesty may seem met, a tract of country, bounded and described as hereafter mentioned, and to obtain the consent of her, quote, Indian subjects, end quote, inhabiting said tract of land, and to make a treaty and to arrange with them so that there may be peace and goodwill between them and Her Majesty. Today, Indigenous people right across our country here on Turtle Island continue to lift up and acknowledge our obligations to treaty. And one of those obligations is to continue to ensure that those seeking peace, those seeking freedom, and those seeking prosperity can continue to find those things across our country. Those historic treaties are so critical and important to the founding of this country and continue to be aspects to which many new Canadians still rely on to gain access to Canada. I was noted earlier today, for example, some of the remarkable contributions made not only to this place, the House of Commons, by Polish Canadians, but even to the very founding of the Prairie Provinces much later on. Today, the diaspora of Polish Canadians is right across our country, and it's most particular in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta. The first Polish immigration to Alberta was in the 1880s. And it followed the adhesion of those historic treaties I mentioned 4 years prior to their first settlement. I grew up, Madam Speaker, with many stories. I grew up with many Ukrainians and many Polish folks in the northeast part of rural Alberta. We had traded, we discussed, and today, for example, in the Indigenous communities in Alberta's northeast, there are still artifacts and stories of those times of first settlement, including the trading of textiles and goods. So it's no question that Polish Canadians have done so much, not only to ensure the future of our provinces that we enjoy today, but the very hard work it took to ensure that they could be places for all of us to enjoy. In my city of Edmonton, for example, many Polish Canadians pray and worship at the Holy Rosemary Church. It's by the Northern Alberta Institute of Technology in Edmonton, where many of my own constituents attend and pray in peace. There's also, for example, the Canadian Polish Research Institute, an immense and extensive library of archives and history, and they publish excellent data that's driven by important research. In addition to all that, we also have the Canadian Polish Historical Society, established in my city of Edmonton, a great Canadian organization with the primary mission to promote the understanding and exploration of Polish history, customs, and culture. They gather and they preserve significant historical documents that highlight the achievements of individuals of Polish heritage in Edmonton and Alberta, maintaining records of many Canadian Polish immigrants. And so I encourage members of our House to look to some of these organizations, in particular the Canadian Polish Historical Society, and see how they've contributed in so many ways to the communities we all know and love, but in particular your own communities. For Polish Canadians, however, there is still much more work that needs to be done in order to ensure they have a promotion of their unique language, their unique heritage, and truly their unique culture here in Canada. We have to urge the federal government not only recognize the month of recognize Polish Heritage Month, but to also ensure that we go further by ensuring there's tangible resources that promote Polish culture, heritage, and learning amongst all Canadians. Madam Speaker, our country is truly great. It's great because of the qualities of diversity it holds so near and dear to its soul and to its being, as manifested in the history of our country is promised by First Nations, Métis, and Inuit persons to that of the Crown to continue to ensure that new Canadians can find peace and prosperity here, and to ensure that their histories are never forgotten. Canada is a young country, Madam Speaker. And because it's a young country, it's so important that we lift up and hold sacred those stories to which created a foundation that we all enjoy today. Following the immense work of building farms, building townhomes, and eventually building villages and cities, Canada is a prosperous place because of those sacrifices. And until we acknowledge fully the immense contributions of many Canadians in its early settlement period, particularly by Ukrainian and Polish and other Eastern European individuals, we would not have a Canada. And so I am so grateful and honored to be able to rise in support of Motion 75 on behalf of all New Democrats, and to ensure that we continue to lift up Polish heritage and to continue to strive to ensure that their stories, the unique perspectives, and what they have to offer to Canada can continue for many, many more years to come. Madam Speaker, I'm excited for us to vote on M-75 and to see hopefully swift and unanimous passage of Polish Heritage Month here in the House of Commons. Thank you so much.
Resuming debate, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Minister of Employment, Workforce Development and Official Languages.
Madam Speaker, as a proud Polish Canadian, I am so honoured to rise in the House of Commons to speak to the rich history, heritage and contributions of Polish Canadians to Canada and to the rich and vibrant multicultural tapestry of our country. I want to begin by saying a heartfelt dziękuję, thank you, to my friend and colleague, the MP for Mississauga East Cooksville, for bringing forward this historic legislation that will establish the first ever National Polish Heritage Month in Canada. There are 1.1 million Canadians of Polish descent living in Canada, in communities in every corner of our country, including major centres in Halifax, Montreal, Ottawa, Vancouver, Toronto, Hamilton, Winnipeg, Calgary, and Vancouver, including my community of Windsor-Tecumseh. Polish Canadians are business leaders, teachers and nurses, engineers and electricians, artists and athletes. They drive trucks that deliver the goods. They are as resilient and determined as they are generous and kind, and they have been a blessing to this country, just as Canada has been a blessing to us. The story of Polish immigration to Canada is remarkable, and it provides an insight into a community that prides itself on the values of service above self, that prioritizes family, community, and faith. The first Polish immigrant, a fur trader, landed in Canada in 1752, but the first wave of Polish immigrants to Canada arrived in 1858 from the Kashub region of northern Poland. They made their home in Renfrew County in the town of Wilno, the oldest settlement in Canada, Polish settlement in Canada. For 2 centuries, subsequent waves of Polish Canadians arrived in Canada, at times to flee conflict and persecution, but always to build a better future for themselves and for their children. The Polish-Canadian story is a quintessential Canadian story, and it is one I want to tell from the perspective of my family and our Polish community in Windsor. Back in Poland, my father was an electrical engineer and a leader in the Solidarity movement that fought for the rights of workers against the communist dictatorship. Minutes past midnight on December 13, 1981, martial law was declared, Solidarity leaders were rounded up, and the police arrived at our door to arrest my father. After his release, Canada offered us safe harbor, and in April 1983, we landed at Pearson Airport. We spent the first year in Scarborough, in an apartment block with Polish families who arrived the same way we did. My parents took English language courses at George Brown College during the day. My dad laid tile during the evenings to save up for a car and to buy his boys their first Christmas gift in Canada, hockey sticks. Within a year, my dad landed a job in the auto industry in Windsor, and so we barreled down the 401 with a heart full of hope and gratitude and a little trepidation about the road ahead. For Polish Canadians, like so many immigrants, the gratitude finds expression in an enormous sense and need to give back, to volunteer, to help build our Canada and build the communities that have become our homes. Madam Speaker, I see the expression in my community of Windsor, Essex, that is home to a vibrant community of 12,000 Polish Canadians. The heart of our community has always been Holy Trinity Catholic Church on the corner of Langlois and Ellis. It is where my brother and I were quickly enrolled as altar servers. It's where we celebrate Pasterka, or Midnight Mass, and where I married my better half, Shauna. Saturday mornings were spent attending Polish school at St. Angela Elementary with wonderful teachers like Pani Bohus, Pani Zahaluk, and Sisters Maris and Urszula from the Ursuline Sisters. They made sure we kept the Polish language alive. They taught Polish history about Copernicus and Marie Curie Skłodowska and the Battle of Grunwald. It's where we learned about Janusz Żurakowski, the test pilot for the Avro Arrow and the first Canadian to break the sound barrier. Where we learned about Sir Kazimierz Gzowski, an engineer who helped build the Grand Trunk Railway and the Welland Canal, who Canada Post put on the 5-cent stamp. It's where we learned about Stanley Hajdasz, a doctor, member of parliament, the first minister of state for multiculturalism, and the first senator of Polish descent. After Sunday morning Mass at Holy Trinity, we would stop by Black's Bakery for fresh rye bread and strudel. Black's is the oldest bakery in Windsor. It opened in 1918. And on Fat Tuesday, there are literally lineups around the block to get a box of their famous plum-filled pączki. And at the same time, we would head over to European Market or Polish Village Deli to pick up deli meats, pierogi, or kielbasa for the barbecue. Polish Canadians are incredibly industrious and entrepreneurial. In addition to shops and restaurants that brought color and flavor to Ottawa Street, there were Polish-owned factories that provided thousands of jobs for local residents for generations. Companies like Victoria Steel, White Eagle Press, Górski Transport, and Narmco, started by the Bas, Polewski, Rodzik, and Górski families, who gave back to the community in so many ways. And just last week, I attended the reopening of the University of Windsor Law School building that underwent generational renovations, funded in part by the generous contribution of the Rodzik family. Indeed, Polish Canadians are known for their honest and hard work. Skilled machinists, electricians, engineers. Many rose to positions that shaped local industry, especially our vital auto sector. Mr. Puklicz as the plant manager of the Windsor Essex Ford engine plant, Mr. Frank Uławishin as the vice president at Chrysler are just two examples. But outside the business world, the Polish community made tremendous contributions through the arts, culture, and sport. Dom Polski, or the Polish Hall, was the hub of cultural life in our community, the place where theater productions were held, where the Tatry Dance Ensemble performed, and where weddings and celebrations took place. Dom Polski is also where each year the Polish community throws open its doors, hosting a Polish village that draws thousands of local residents for live music, dancing, and great Polish food as part of the annual Carousel of the Nations celebrations. This year, the Polonia Center Sports Club celebrated its 40th anniversary thanks to the dedication of volunteers like Mr. Kowalczykowski and Mr. Sack, who coach soccer players from all ages and all backgrounds from across Windsor, Essex. The incredible spirit of volunteerism drives the Polish community. It's who we are. And I'm proud to say my parents, Marta and Richard, were part of a long tradition of volunteers and leaders who gave their time and energy to organizations like the Polonia Center that organized and raised funds for educational and cultural events that brought community together. Polonia Center set up annual scholarships for students from all backgrounds attending post-secondary. An annual fund was set up to help the University of Windsor purchase books for the Leddy Library. That sense of solidarity extends far beyond the community. And when natural disasters like floods hit Canada and around the world, the community quickly mobilized to raise funds. When 9/11 hit, the community even sent a letter to the mayor of New York with a check for $5,000 to support victim families. And 2 years ago, when Russia invaded Ukraine, the community quickly organized the pasta and pierogi dinner and raised over $30,000 for Ukrainians and for Ukraine. Solidarity and hospitality go hand in hand, Madam Speaker. And there's an old saying in Polish, gość w domu, Bóg w domu, which means when a guest is in the house, God is in the house. And it is why we saw hundreds of thousands of Poles opening their apartments to 1.5 million Ukrainian refugees fleeing the war. It is the Polish thing to do when your neighbor calls for help. A terrific example of the combination of solidarity and hospitality was the building of Polonia Park in 1980, a neighborhood containing 342 affordable and attainable townhouses that the Polish community constructed thanks to Monsignor Lawrence Wnuk and visionary volunteers like Jan Partyka, Jan Armata, Staniec, Mitch Puklic, and the Bass and Polewski families. It was pioneering, decades ahead of its time, and it went a long way to make sure that all Canadians in Windsor could find an affordable place to live in dignity and with pride. And I know because Polonia Park afforded my family our first home in Windsor. Service to community is a huge part of our Polish heritage, and so too is service to our country. The same Dom Polski that hosted weddings and Polish theater was also the home of the Polish Army in North America during the Second World War, and a recruitment center for Polish volunteers heading to Europe. Much like in 1917, the Government of Canada opened the Polish Army training camp called Camp Kościuszko in Niagara-on-the-Lake under General Józef Haller, where 22,000 volunteers were trained to fight as the Polish Blue Army in the First World War. Throughout history, Poland and Canada have been brothers in arms in major battles like the Battle of Britain and Monte Cassino, where Polish and Canadian soldiers now rest together in cemeteries of honor. Madam Speaker, last week I had a chance to reflect upon my family's story and how our single thread weaves its way into the beautiful fabric of the Polish-Canadian story in Canada. I attended a citizenship ceremony for 49 new Canadians who arrived in Canada from 18 different countries. I saw in their eyes that happiness, that hope, that promise, above all, that incredible feeling of gratitude that fills your heart knowing you are Canadian, knowing that Canada is your home. I am proud of my Polish heritage. I am proud to be Polish Canadian. And with your help, my dear colleagues, we will have a Polish Heritage Month to celebrate a long-standing and colorful piece of that beautiful, beautiful Canadian mosaic together. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The honourable member for resuming debate, the honourable member for Yellowhead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I know my time is very short, and I, like many other members of Parliament in this House, have a Polish heritage. I know the last name I can't say in the House, it's not appropriate, but my mother's maiden name is Satorski, which does sound very Polish with the ski at the end. So my great-grandparents actually come to Alberta in 1906. So I know for a lot of other family members that's not that long of a time, but for Albertans that's actually quite a while that my family has been in Canada. I want to talk about how Yakov and Ann Zatorski did come to this country from Poland because they wanted to have a much better life. And that is the whole purpose why they came. And from that date, they had many children, 13 to be precise, which was my grandfather, Paul Zatorski, that was born in 1913. So in some ways, I'm already a third-generation Canadian and Albertan from that side of the family. So it's nice to see that we are supporting this Heritage Month for Polish people and Polish descents of people. It's very important to many Canadians for this history that we have amongst each other. Now, I know that when they came to Canada, they didn't have much with them, and in 1906, very few families had much for any possessions in that, and I'm sorry, Madam Speaker, but my time...
I'm sorry that I have to interrupt you, but the honourable member will have 8.5 minutes the next time this matter is before the House. The time provided for the consideration of private members' business has now expired, and the order is dropped to the bottom of the order of precedence on the order paper. Comme il est 14 heures.
As it is 2:30 p.m., the House will be adjourned until next Monday at 11 a.m., pursuant to the relevant standing